I fell out of school, fell into the local factory, and within the first week you do the induction course, health and safety, measured up for overalls. That was a challenge given that I'm rather small, so mine were made to measure. And in that induction course there was the trade union, introduction to the trade union. So I signed for my pension, and then I was able to do shifts, and I signed to join the union, and that was fabulous. And then within the first months of being an apprentice, I entered an area called the test areas in Rolls Royce in Bristol. Now this area had a great dynamic to it, because Rolls Royce would have invested millions of pounds of money to produce this product, which is an aero engine, and this particular area that it ends up as it's manufactured, machined, and then constructed and organised, and then the people in test are the final point where the product then goes to the customer. So the dynamic is Rolls-Royce invest the millions, and until the people of test say it's good, they don't get paid. So of course that dynamic is the best terms and conditions, because the negotiating power was there, was always in the test areas. So I watched and observed this trade union organisation, the movement, who had a tremendous tradition, and I learnt a lot. Then I stood for shop steward and was elected in the test areas, and then I stood for senior steward and was elected, and I had some great teachers throughout that time, and we always took the fight to the employer. If ever the employer wanted a change, our view was that's fine, it would be a mass meeting, despite they would, well no, you've been elected, you can make these decisions, but we always had mass meetings so the members would decide. But the theory behind those mass meetings were we would discuss the employer's request, and then we'd discuss the politics of the day, any struggles that were happening, and always we would do a solidarity collection at the end. So people would come to the mass meeting with money in their pockets, and that was the politicisation. And of course we would generally reject the employer's request as well. The evolution was certainly the majority of which was within Rolls Royce and through the various committees and trade union structures. But I remember my very first strike that we had to decide to go on strike was in support of someone else, which was the NHS, the nurses. That was way back in the 80s, and we had to discuss the matter and decide the course of action, which was solidarity support. And what a fabulous mass meeting that was, to lend our support for somebody else, and of course we did a collection at the end of it as well. Now that was legal then, you could meet, you could discuss, you could decide, but that's been criminalised since with the anti-trade union laws that perhaps we'll go on to later on. But from there, of course, I was involved in other actions, which were the discuss, decide, do of the mass meetings. So they would be either walkouts or sit-ins or occupations, primarily for ourselves or for our own conditions or attacks, or it would be in support of somebody else. And these would be over the course of months or years, but do you know, the more times that you do these things, the less frequent they happen, because the employer will learn a lesson, particularly if you win, of course. So these things, these actions, these collective decisions certainly politicised me and made me realise the strength of the collectivity of the trade union movement. And of course the dynamic of the employer trade union and the products that they produce, but with our hands produce these products and the profits for the employers. So I want more than the crumbs of the cake. We are the ingredients. No, I want the cake. The government, the condemn government that nobody voted for, talks about austerity, and there's no alternative. In my view, they couldn't be more wrong. And I think that we need to remind ourselves over and over again, because it's almost lost in recent history. It's not a crisis of our making. This is a crisis of the finance sector, the banking bosses, the greed, the deregulation, etc., etc. And then we're going to pay the price. That's the austerity. So I say, of course, there's an alternative. But I say it in two ways. We should always remind ourselves it's not a crisis of our making, so we should not be asked to pay the price. And what is the alternative? Well, you know, I would raise 3 taxes immediately. I would raise the Tobin tax, you know, the financial transaction tax. I would raise that. I would raise the higher rate of tax. for, I don't know, put a figure on it. You could, I could, let's put 60p on the pound for every 100,000. That's still a very wealthy salary. And let's have a mansion tax. You know, I'm being won over to the argument of the bedroom tax, providing it's more than 7 or 10 empty rooms. And imagine the Queen and people of her ilk with the 80 or so empty rooms in Balmoral and Buckingham Palace and all those other things. But the serious point is, of course, there's an alternative. It's who pays. And the country is sloshing around with money. I would make one cut. I would cut Trident to the tune of 75 billion over the course of its life or death, which is predominantly what it's for. So I would raise 3 taxes, those on the very wealthy and on the financial institution, those that caused this crisis, and I'd make one cut immediately. And I think, although I'm not the greatest mathematician, but I think with those measures, then the true cost would be paid by those that inflicted these crimes on us, and we wouldn't have to face any cuts at all. No austerity, in my view. I'm deeply disappointed with the labour movement, the TUC, and their response to austerity. I went on the anti-cuts, anti-austerity march. It was a beautiful march, it was big and it was lively. But the slogan from the Labour Party and the TUC was not so deep, not so fast. Well, I just don't go along with that at all. Why deep? Why any speed? No, there has to be. It's not a crisis of our making, so we're not going to pay the price, because a cut is a cut is a cut. Whether we have it today or tomorrow, you know, I don't go along this, do you want a kick in the head or a kick up the butt? Well, I want neither. So my disappointment is profound, frankly, because I think what they're arguing about is the difference on a pinhead. And indeed, the condemns of most recently, since we've lost the AAA rating, whatever that means, I thought it was batteries that went in my Walkman, but they've turned the phrase not so deep, not so fast on its head and say faster, deeper, as if to, if you like, goad the opposition, the Labour movement. No, it's not in my name, any cut, thank you. Politics abhors the vacuum, and the right wing will fill it if we don't. And by we, I mean the left wing. So if Labour or other organisations are saying not so deep, not so fast, and people don't see that as a solution, then the right wing will move in. UKIP, of course, most recently. But we're talking about parliamentary politics here, and it's not the BNP or it's not the EDL, by the way, but you know, some people say the BNP with suits on, although their arguments are a little more nuanced. Their racism might be a little softer for some circles, or their xenophobia. But of course I'm worried with even if they got one vote. But in UKIP's terms of, or even parliamentary terms, certainly in by-elections or local elections, then and even European elections, do you know the majority, well, you do know this, but the majority of people actually don't vote. And I want to be on the side of the majority, because I think these are the people that can be won. And do you know, I think that people who don't cast a vote are given that option. Well, there's the right wing, there's the, you know, feeding on the politics of hate over hope, or the politics of despair over, you know, positive things. So I think actually the fact that UKIP aren't getting huge votes is a reason to be optimistic, but any vote they get would be reason for concern. But Labour aren't offering a real solution. So to me it's no surprise, and of course the condemns, or Cam Moron, or the Liberal Democrats who reneged on whatever it was, you know, all their pledges about tuition things and all those other things. And by the way, Clegg, the name Clegg, if you look in the dictionary, is horsefly, although that's with one G, I think. And I think they pitch on shit, and he certainly pitched on some shit when he joined with the Tories, didn't he? I don't think the unions are doing enough to encourage, to organise women within the trade union movement, within the workplace. However, I suspect that women, or anyone for that matter, are probably fed up to the eye teeth of predominantly white, predominantly middle-aged men telling them how to organise Anyway, I suspect it was white middle-aged men that denied them the vote when the suffragettes organised themselves and successfully got the vote, or whether it was Ford workers, women Ford workers who were after parity, and of course there's still disparity in wages right now. But I think that trade unions can certainly be far more open, but I would like women to organise themselves, but for the trade union to be that vehicle for which they feel comfortable within that. You know, in the election for Unite General Secretary last time, there was a woman candidate. Her name was Gail Cartmel, and actually on her blog site she talked about too much willy waving within Unite, and she may well be right. This time round, it's to my profound sadness that there isn't a woman standing for the Unite General Secretary. In fact, Gail Cartmel is backing the other candidate, Len McCluskey. Presumably he has a willy, I really don't know, but there is two white men standing again for the biggest union in the country, and I think that's a poor show, frankly. I admire Ken Loach. I think he's a fabulous person. His political views are very similar to myself. Ken Loach calls for a new Workers' Party. He may be right. I think it's whether it's the time and the place. Do you know where I see is the majority, whether it's in the police commission or whether it's in by-elections or whether it's in local elections, the majority don't vote right now. And I don't think they're apathetic. I think they don't see much of an alternative. So I want to be on the side of the majority, and I think the things that enthuse me right here, right now, is UK Uncut. It's 38 Degrees, it's Occupy. Those movements are really vibrant, the flash mobs, and these are the people actually that have brought to book the people that have been avoiding tax. The rest, do you know, what I hear ringing in my ears is the massive sound of hands being wrung like this. So Ken Loach might be right. Is it the time, is it the place? I'm unconvinced. Can Labour be reclaimed? I don't think so. Trade union leaders very often say the right thing, heap praise on the Occupy movement, or they call for civil disobedience, but it's rhetoric, and the rhetoric doesn't meet the reality. Indeed, on the civil disobedience, when that was called by the TUC or the General Secretary of Unite, Len McCluskey, when there's actual civil disobedience, they're seldom there to be seen. It's something like a catchphrase rather than an action. So heaping praise on Occupy is one thing. If I was General Secretary at the time of the Occupy movement outside St Paul's, Unite would have had a tent there, because that's where the movement was. So it's one thing to heap praise, but then that catchphrase becomes an action. Join them where it is, be where it is, be part of the movement. Otherwise, I think your credibility is shot away. So there's one thing saying the right thing, but you know, saying the right thing and then not doing the right thing is probably worse than not saying it at all, because you lose all that credibility. Within hours, days, the first 100 days of a Unite under a General Secretary with me, if you like, is the election of officials, where members decide who represents them, not appointments where you're told who you have from one day to the next. So not less, because there's some things that are happening, it's good. Community branches where unemployed people, I'm unemployed, you can join a community branch for 50p a week, so it's not cost punitive. And community branch, which is what it is, it can organise around the community. And this is going to be one that I see something that we need far more of, because community branches are good. They've been very slow setting up. 8 months before I was placed, we still haven't got a bank account. So I don't say less, I say not even the same. More community branches quicker. Get involved in, if it's the bedroom tax and there's an eviction in the offing, let's have the Unite community branch. Join with that street, that neighbourhood, and ring fence it. It might well be a Unite member that's being forced with eviction. You know, the working poor that we hear about. Workplace branch organisation, which is going on at the moment. Workplace is where the power lies. Remember what I said about my education, about the dynamic in the workplace and how you can really turn things round. But they're so slow, it's unbelievable. And by the way, it's by diktat. Workplace organisation, of course, but members should decide what branch they're in. So it's more involvement, more say, more control. And this is really where I have a passion. Rank and file grassroots is not a catchphrase, it's an action. So instead of a formulaic, bureaucratic organisation. It's where the members have control. We have rank and file sector organisation in all sectors. Finance, health, the construction is the model, not the exception. And where rank and file electricians took matters in their own hands because Unite was behind the game, where 8 employers decided to renege on national agreements, you know, sweep them to one side, where you give the employee a date, come to work on that day, and all your conditions changed. If you don't come to work, you're sacked. The union takes forever to organise. 500 of our members did it themselves and embarked on civil disobedience, taking the fight to the employer, blocking Oxford Street or wherever else these rogue 8 employers, Balfour Beatties and Skanskas and Lang O'Rourke's, taking the fight to them where they ate their fine dined meals. And the point there is that members decide, members discuss and then do. And the union supports, throws its support. Vestas on the Isle of Wight, in my view, and the Olympics projects are opportunities. And this is the point I guess I'd like to finish on, unless there's any more questions. To recognise an opportunity and maximise its potential is what Unite can be uniquely, if you like, the vanguard. Because Unite is the biggest union in the country with 1.5 million members. It's potentially the most powerful and seldom realises its potential. So when something presents itself, Vestas on the Isle of Wight was a manufacturer making a profit. It did turbine blades, green energies, which I passionately support. Not 1,000 years of nuclear waste to damage the planet, but green energies and 1 million jobs that can go along with it in design, manufacture and construction. Vestas on the Isle of Wight, 600 employees, only 14 in the union. Going to invest 1 minute, pull the plug the next. That's what employers do, chasing cheaper labour across the globe. But they occupied. This workforce occupied without a trade union organisation, probably just as well, because an occupation is illegal. We've been criminalised, and what trade unions very often do is they recoil when there's something illegal instead of throwing their support behind it, right over wrong. So the union went nowhere near it, but it was popular. The eyes of the world was on Vestas on the Isle of Wight and that occupation, and we were nowhere to be seen. If I were General Secretary then, or the next Vestas, I would be on the roof with the occupiers. So the eyes of the world would be on us for the reasons that I've just described. This thing is right. What the employers was doing was wrong. And then I think it's the greatest recruiting tool of all. Wouldn't that factory have been saved? I think so. Would it have been taken into public ownership, which I subscribe to? Yes. Would it still be making turbine blades? Absolutely. And would we have 600 members there in that factory? Yes, probably 6,000 on the Isle of Wight, 60,000 more in the UK and beyond. So leaders lead, and lead by example, but members should control. And the Olympics project is the shining example, where it had an end date. Things can overrun financially. That could not overrun with the date. And we were one of the lead unions on that site. Wouldn't you imagine? I bet you've negotiated, whatever it might be in your life or your work experience. I know I have. Anyone who negotiates would know, whether you're selling something on eBay, the best time to do it is when somebody else wants that off of you. And we had that power. We could have negotiated with the then government, the Labour government who commissioned it, to say that the Olympics project would not get built until the first 3,200 illegally blacklisted construction workers are offered jobs on that site. And in doing so, we would have won. They would have to have capitulated. We could have then taken on and defeated the anti-union laws. That is by far and away the biggest betrayal of the 13 years, 3 terms of a Labour government, funded to the hilt by the trade unions to the tune of 10 millions of pounds, brought in by Thatcher and the Tories, left unchanged by Labour, unchallenged by the TUC and my own union. And those anti-union laws leave us shackled now. They criminalise trade unionists, My first strike was in support of the NHS and the nurses. If I did that now, it would be illegal, but I need to do it. I believe we should be doing it. If they're closing that hospital, that school, that library, why shouldn't I be able to withdraw my labour in support? I might need that hospital. My kids might go to that school. I might go to that library. Every job loss is secondary action against us. Every job is a family, is a person, and that in itself gives me the right to support them. I did say the Olympics was the last point I wanted to make. In actual fact, it's not. As a General Secretary, the relationship that Unite has with Labour Party is one of a one-way relationship. We plough our members' money into it and we get so little in return. My view is that our members' money is precious. It should be held in clenched fist until Labour do the right things. It's after the event. We only support Labour MPs that vote for our policies, and we were against PFI, and Labour MPs, one after another, voted for it. And of course we're paying for that forever and a day. We were against the raising of the retirement age, and Labour MPs voted for it. I wouldn't pay them a penny piece. Labour councillors, Labour councils who vote for cuts wouldn't get a penny piece of Unite's money. Those that vote against, of course, because we're not going to pay the price of someone else's crisis, would get the support of Unite. And my very last point, I promise, is as General Secretary, I would take an average wage, because I think that's the way leaders lead and show an example. I would take an average wage, why not, of those members that we represent. Not for me the six-figure sum, the 100,000, 110,000, 120,000 or more. The lifestyle that our members do not live. That, to me, is the end result. Appointed officials on a job for life, a General Secretary on a six-figure sum, none of them living the lifestyle, the hurt, the pain that we feel, the pensions cut that we get. That's the way to reconnect. Be part of the movement, not adrift from the movement, so that when we say something, my rhetoric becomes the reality. And then when you stare in the eyes of the opposition, the government, the condemned government, or the Labour governments to come, whichever persuasion, or the employers who are meting out the cuts to our pay terms and conditions, they believe what you say. Unite will realise its potential. They will recognise the opportunities and maximise them, and we'll get the union back to hand it back. And members will feel a worth. They'll be inspired. They'll have a confidence of themselves to rise up against this crisis, because I believe in a better world. Do you know, if we can see the Berlin Wall come down, if we can see the end of apartheid, if we can smash the poll tax and see the end of Thatcher, we can certainly become the next General Secretary of Unite, kick Cameron and Clegg, the horsefly, where they belong, into the dustbin of history, and maybe even the New Workers' Party, whoever wants to replace them. But it starts here. It starts with the movement, and it starts with us reconnecting right now.